Right. Can I start now? Right, since it's 8:30 already. Okay. Assalamualaikum. Good morning. Welcome back to our physical class. All right. So I'm Dr. Nashikin. Hope you still remember me. Physically, you always see me online, but some of you may not have seen me physically or meet me before. Okay. So yeah, we continue with our lecture. So previously, we have talked about environmental pollution, the first topic, and then we moved to solid waste management in the second LU, and today we are going to cover liquid wastewater treatment. Okay, so the waste is divided into solid and liquid. So previously we talked about solid, so now we talk about liquid wastewater. Right. So what happened to the liquid that comes out from your house, from the university, from offices, from shops? So where do those wastewater go? So that's what we're going to cover, and that is actually the environmental science, the environmental study. But we also have to relate with biotechnology, okay? Because we are in biotech. All right, so that's going to be our topic today. So what we're going to cover, the subtopics. What we're going to cover. So we're going to have a look at the process overview. Okay, so the liquid wastewater treatment is normally carried out by Sewage department. Okay, so in Malay it is called Jabatan Pembentungan. Yeah, so every city, every town has its own sewerage department. So that department is responsible for managing the wastewater, and not just managing, treating the wastewater, so that the wastewater that is released to the water bodies like sea, rivers, they will not contain too much contaminants because from the wastewater. Okay, so the overview of the process can be divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary processes, and these processes happen at the sewage treatment plant. Okay, so that is what is done by the sewerage department. All right. So that's the main processes. But before primary treatment, actually there is a pre-treatment, right? So pre-treatment, primary, secondary, tertiary, and also there is another branch of the treatment process, which is the sludge treatment and disposal. Okay, and finally we're going to discuss some possible biotechnological approaches for wastewater treatment. Okay. Penat lah pula kain mas. Okay. So, right. So, okay. Let me give some background, right? Some background before we go into the main processes. Okay. So, what is first defined by liquid waste treatment is a process. Is a process of treating or removing the contaminants from the wastewater. Okay, wastewater. First, you have to understand the wastewater that comes from many sources, from university, from housing areas, from the industry. But it can be divided into municipal or domestic wastewater and industrial wastewater. Okay, so municipal wastewater are those from housing areas, urban areas, shops, universities, towns, and industrial wastewater are those wastewater released by the industrial areas, factories, and maybe certain estate areas. Okay. So the treatment, the treatment process is defined as the process of removing contaminants from the wastewater and household sewage using physical, chemical, and biological processes. Okay, so take note on that point. Okay, take note on that one, physical, chemical, and biological processes. So that method, that are actually the methods applied at the treatment plant, okay? So by right, you should know what does it mean. Physical means it's a process or method that just involve the alteration or the control of the physical parts. For example, the temperature, the pH, that is the physical characteristics of the process. Okay, that is meant by physical, or moving, and maybe like removing things, like during the pre-treatment screening. So it's something to do with the physical parts of the waste. Chemical process. So by right, it should involve addition of chemicals because it involves chemical reaction. Okay, and biological processes are those processes that involve biological organism, right? So that is actually our interest because it involves biotech processes. Okay, so but the whole process here, it combines all those things. It doesn't only use biological process, it doesn't use chemical, but it combines all. So in some stages it involves physical, and some stages it involves others, right? But the main aim is to remove the contaminants, so that the released wastewater is not that environmentally hazardous. Okay, right. Okay, I've talked about the process involved. Okay, right. The prospect of the wastewater. So the system. If you talk about the system in general, right? The treatment of the wastewater, it can be divided into two main categories. The first one is open collection system, and the second one is closed collection system. So it's easy to understand. Open means that the wastewater is actually exposed to the environment, and that is not the practice in Malaysia. So that's why we don't see, obviously, the wastewater. Like, of course, you see, but it's actually more under the ground. So our sewage treatment system is categorized as a closed collection system. Okay. And in this topic, we are going to focus on closed collection system. Okay, so this is how it looks like, the closed collection system. So if you imagine the wastewater that comes from housing areas, from shops, from urban areas, it is actually channeled through this what we call sewer. Okay, it looks like pipe, but that is not actually pipe. It's sewer. This is the term. So you have to take note on several terminologies in this topic. What is sewage? Sewerage. Just now when I talked about Jabatan Pembentungan, right? It's sewerage. SEWERAGE, sewerage. So sewerage is different from sewage. Sewage is the thing that is actually the wastewater. Okay, and sewer here. Sewer means that channel it looks like pipe, but it's not pipe. But this is actually that contain the wastewater. Okay. This is how it looks like. It is channeled to the sewer under the ground, and that's why it is named as closed system. Yeah. Okay. So this is an overview at the sewage treatment plant. Okay. The whole plant, the whole area here is called sewage treatment plant because it is the area where the wastewater that comes from all areas in a city, right? For example, in Kuching, there is a sewage treatment plant that is responsible for treating the wastewater that comes from various sources. So you imagine that under the ground, there are many sewers from many areas, from all angles, actually. So it goes to this treatment plant, okay? So at this treatment plant, what I said just now, the main the main processes, the primary, pre-treatment, primary, secondary, and tertiary treatments, they are all happen here, okay? And there are some areas that are actually for primary, first for pre-treatment, so where the wastewater first enter, right? And then it screen all the physical objects, yeah, because it just want to channel the water, right? So that is the purpose of pre-treatment. And after that, it goes to the primary treatment area, okay? Like for example, yeah, so here is primary treatment, and then secondary is here. So after the primary, it will be channeled to the secondary treatment area, and then it will go to the tertiary treatment area. Okay, but this process is actually a broad process. But under primary treatment, it can be various methods. For example, like the sewerage department in Kuching may apply certain methods for performing the primary treatment. But maybe sewerage department in Singapore, they have different methods. Okay, but the main aim of every stage is basically similar. Okay. Now, this one, I'm not sure where this picture is, but it's just one of the treatment plant, and this is a little bit smaller, right? Maybe in it depends on the size of the city or town. Like for a small town or small city, they may have smaller treatment plant. For large cities like KL, Johor Bahru, Penang, so they might have larger treatment plant, and they may have more than one, not just one to cater the whole city. Okay. All right. So this is another example of the treatment plant, which is much smaller. Right. So I would like to play this video. So this is a video that shows how the whole processes happen at sewage treatment plants. So by watching this video, perhaps you may have some ideas before I go into detail for every stage. Okay. All right. So let's watch this.
Cities and towns have sewage systems in place to carry wastewater from our homes, hotels, factories, and other establishments to a plant where the wastewater is treated. It is then deemed safe to release in other water sources. Treatment of wastewater goes through different stages. Wastewater is treated to remove physical, chemical, and biological contaminants present in it through various processes. The pre-treatment process involves the sewage being sent through grids or vertical bars that remove large solid substances like metal cans, paper, and plastic containers. In primary treatment process, the sewage flows through the grid chamber very slowly, so that the sand, pebbles, and soil settle down at the bottom. The sewage flows into the settling tank or sedimentation tank, where the solid wastes like feces are allowed to settle down. Wastes such as soaps, oils, and grease rise to the top of the wastewater. The waste material that settles down at the bottom is called the sludge, and the floatable material is called the scum. Scum is then removed using a skimmer, and sludge is removed with a scraper every few days. The water that is left out is called the clarifying water. In the secondary treatment process, biological or organic wastes are removed. It is a biological process. This is done by transferring clarified water into an aeration tank, where air lowers bubble air, which helps the aerobic bacteria to grow and feed on the organic contaminants such as food waste, feces, and other organisms. The mixture then flows from the aeration tank into the clarifier, where activated sludge settles out by gravity. The activated sludge so produced along with the sludge produced in the primary process is transferred to the digester, where it is decomposed by anaerobic bacteria. Biogas is produced in this process, which can be used as fuel or can be used to produce electricity. The activated sludge is then left in the sand drying beds, Some quantity of water in the activated sludge evaporates, and the remaining quantity drains to the sand. This leaves behind the remaining dried sludge, which will be used for making fertilizers or compost. In the tertiary treatment process, the leftover wastewater is treated with chlorine to remove the phosphorus compounds, nitrogen compounds, and bacteria. It is a chemical process. Chlorine tablets are added into the germs. This process is called chlorination. Then this water is let off into the waterways.
Okay. Okay, so that covers actually what I want to cover in the next few slides. Okay, I just want to highlight a few things. Just some of you have seen, right? So it started with the pre-treatment, where all the physical objects are screened and prevented from entering the plant because they just want to treat the wastewater and not the objects. So that happened at the pre-treatment. Okay, and they have this kind of thing like bar screen and different, like as I said just now, different plants may have different equipment, different way of doing it, but they have it. They have the process, yeah, the screening process. Okay, this is how it looks like. Some of the equipment, examples of the equipment, and also what is this? Oh, this is going to primary treatment. Okay, so after the pre-treatment, the wastewater, only the liquid goes to the primary treatment units. So under this primary treatment, there are various equipments that are used, right? For example, pre-settling basins, primary sedimentation tanks, primary clarifiers. So what's the purpose of this treatment is to further skim the wastewater. So the wastewater, it may contains like something like, it's not to say solid, but it's something slurry, you know, can you imagine slurry things? So that is where those things are actually separated under this primary treatment. So those slurry, it will settle at the bottom of the tank. For example here, if you see here, so this is where the things will sediment, and the top, only those liquid will be on top of the tank. And just now you see the video, there is also another component called scum, isn't it? So scum will be skimmed. Scum is like, you imagine something like oil on the surface of water. So it will be removed from the surface of the water. Okay, so only the water will be then passed to the secondary treatment. So what happened in the secondary treatment? So basically, secondary treatment involves biological organism. Okay, so the purpose is to enhance the degradation of certain components by the organism. So where do those microorganisms come from? They exist in the water. The wastewater itself contains the organism. So how to trigger them? How to trigger those microorganisms to degrade the wastewater or whatever the organic components in the water? Under this treatment, the system provides air which contains oxygen, because those microorganisms are aerobic. So when they get the oxygen, food, which is actually food to them, they will degrade, they will metabolize whatever the organic components inside the wastewater. So that's what happened in secondary treatment. Okay, all right. There are many methods, many equipments. One of them is this one, trickling filter, right? That's one example of the equipment use. There is also, we call it suspended growth system. It looks like a big tank, like this one. And actually, if you see it live, you can see bubbles circulating around the tank, because that is actually the air provided to the tank. Okay, so the oxygen provided to the tank. So if you, let's say you take the samples here, you can observe maybe under the microscope, you would see they are microorganisms. And they are actually, not to say only one type of microorganism, they are a consortium of microorganisms, means that there are various types of organisms. Okay. And in terms of the aeration system, right, there are two types of aeration system for this suspended growth system. It can be bottom aerated, means that the air comes from the bottom of this tank, and it can also be surface aerated, means the bubbles or the air is provided to the surface and down to the bottom. Okay. And then the tertiary treatment. The tertiary treatment is after the secondary treatment. So what is the purpose of tertiary treatment? Is actually to refine, to provide a final treatment. Means that after the secondary treatment, the water now contains less organic matters because of the action of the microbes. And then in the tertiary treatment, the purpose is to polish that wastewater so that it becomes much less hazardous than it was when it enters the treatment plant. Okay, so under tertiary treatment, there are various methods that can be done. Among the common methods are filtration. Okay, filtration means they use certain filters, and also for biotechnology we have biofilters that can be used to filter. So why it is named as biofilter? Because the filter, it contains certain microorganisms where the water passes through the filter, the microbes can degrade the things, and then the released wastewater will have less contaminants or simpler components that are not hazardous. Okay, so that's one of it, filtration. Lagooning is something like this. So it means that I cannot draw here. So means that after we have the treatment, you just imagine we have the treatment plant, all those units of primary, secondary, and tertiary, right? So you imagine that the purpose of the treatment plant is to discharge the water at the end to the lake or rivers. So before it goes into the lake or rivers, the sewerage department, they would create this kind of lake, like man-made lake or lagoon. Okay, so what is the purpose of it? So they create like a lake, so that the wastewater, it will go to the lake first before it released to the river or the sea. So the purpose is to kind of like to have a trial to see what happened to the water that goes out. Okay, and they check the quality of the water in the lagoon, right? So like for example, this one, you see here, this is actually a man-made lake. Okay, so this is where they will test the quality. They will check whether, if let's say it is okay, so then it will be released to the river or sea, or if let's say there is something wrong, they can rectify the things. So it means that the water will not be released yet to the sea or to the river. Okay, so this method is called lagooning. Yeah, and then what can be also done during the tertiary treatment is to remove certain nutrients from the wastewater. So why they have to remove certain nutrients is because the wastewater may contain certain components like nitrogen or phosphate that can, not phosphate, phosphorus, nitrogen and phosphorus that can trigger the growth of, for example, algae. Okay, so for example, if you see this one, this picture, that algae, that is actually algae. So this phenomenon is called eutrophication. It means that the algae grow excessively. So what happens when there is an excessive growth of algae? it will cover the surface, right? So means that the aquatic organism at the bottom, they may not get enough oxygen, they may not get enough sunlight, so at the end they will die. So it is not actually good, the algae, this excessive growth. So by removing certain nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, that can trigger the growth of algae. So that is how the excessive growth can be prevented. Okay? So that is one of the ways that could be done under tertiary treatment. Okay, and the most common method applied during the tertiary treatment before the wastewater is released is disinfection. It means that they add certain chemicals, normally chlorine, right, to treat the wastewater so that it will kill some whatever the organisms that still exist after the secondary treatment. And bear in mind, we are talking about wastewater treatment. We do not want to. Basically, in Malaysia, we don't drink that wastewater. But in certain countries, they have better technology or certain technology. They can convert the wastewater into drinking water. Okay. But in Malaysia, the drinking water treatment is different. It comes from the mountain, right? And they have their own system or processes. Okay, but we're not going to cover that because that is not waste. That is clean water, right? It's just for you to differentiate the two systems. All right, disinfection can also be carried out using ultraviolet, UV, or ozone, but these two methods are quite pricey and may not be applied in most of the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. Okay. So the most common one is chlorination. All right, so that's done about the pre-treatment, primary until tertiary treatment. Okay, apart from all those processes, so remember just now when we talk about primary treatment, the purpose is to separate the solid from the liquid. So what happened to the things that are accumulated at the bottom of the tank? Right here, like for example, during the primary treatment, we have sedimentation tank. So what happened to this? We call sludge. It is called sludge. So the wastewater is this one. It's proceed with the secondary and finally tertiary. So what happened to this sludge? This is called sludge. It's like wet solid. So what happened to this? These are organic matters. They consist of biomass, consist of microorganisms. So these sludge are normally channeled to another section where it is treated, it is dried, and it is treated and used. It can be reused as compost, okay, because it has organic matters. So these are examples of sludge that has been dried and used for compost, fertilizer, okay, for growing plants. So that is the possible route of sludge, okay. Do you know composting? Compost, yeah. Composting is the process of making the compost. And apart from that, apart from composting, the composting one is actually the cheapest way lah. It doesn't involve high tech punya equipment. Okay, so